We have now made a trip to Wyoming to do a little fishing and check on our cabin and enjoy the cabin right in the shadow of the Wind River Mountains. We made a trip, the 20-mile trip to Pinedale to get a few items we'll need while we're fishing. The big fish is still up on top of Ridley's Market in Pinedale. And then we get the things we need and we head out for the Wind River Mountains to do a little fishing. We're not going to our favorite fishing spot, Soda Lake, because there has been a bad winter kill a couple years in a row, and also there's a chemical change from perfectly natural chemicals coming up in the lake that have killed the fish. Pinedale is a town that's in quite high altitude, so they get the full bore of the winter storms here. It's about 7,000 feet, and it's about 20 miles from where our cabin is. But when we want something, we drive the 20 miles to Pinedale, and now we're heading out and taking a look at the town. It has grown a lot in the last few years, but it still has the flavor of the Wyoming town. Pinedale has most things that you would need for a tourist town and also a ranching town, and there is some oil exploration and drilling around the area. They have built overpasses for their antelope and deer to cross so that hopefully it'll stop some of the senseless highway killing. The animals just walk across on their own little bridge. There are tall fences along the highway to direct them to these overpasses where they can cross with safety in mind. We didn't see the usual herds of antelope. Their numbers are quite low now due to a bad winter kill, and also they had pneumonia. So we didn't see very many antelope, but they'll come back in time. As we go up the Wind River, into the Wind River Mountains, in the National Forest, we see a cattle drive, and it looks like they probably have some dudes. There's some local dude ranches, and the dudes like to go out and ride and help herd the cattle high up into the Wind River Mountains, where they'll graze the rest of the summer. There's a lot of horses and a lot of people here. Our family were very early settlers here, and so most everyone would work on the cattle drives. My uncle was one that was the cook and drove the chuck wagon. He hauled their bedrolls and did the cooking for them. And when he'd cook biscuits on a campfire in a Dutch oven for breakfast, he would set them out on the table, and some of the guys said they're not cooked good enough for me, and the next guy would say they're too done for me. So he deliberately left him in the Dutch oven till smoke started rolling out, and then he threw them out on the table and said, "Here they are, guys. Scrape them to any color you want them." We have reached a small lake right in the edge of the Wind River Mountains, and Marge isn't fishing unless she has worms, so she's trying to get that wriggly old worm on her hook, and she's getting there. So we're going to try going out in the canoe and paddling around. Usually that works a little better than fishing from shore, but the wind's blowing something terrible today, so we're not certain how we're going to do with that wind blowing in the canoe. So we give it a try and go out there, and the wind was blowing so hard it took all of our efforts just to hold the canoe steady and keep it from turning sideways and drifting up on shore. So we only tried that for a short time, and all the energy was on keeping the canoe straight, and we caught no fish from the canoe. So if that's not going to work, we'll just go over on shore and cast our hooks out and try it from shore. At least we won't have to spend all of our energy trying to keep things straight. The water is real nice and clear, and this is a rather small lake. It does have a bald eagle nest on one side of it, and when you fish over near that side, if an eagle sees you catch a fish, he sits there and wonders where his fish is. We struggle trying to hold the canoe steady and try to fish in that kind of wind out there, and the wind just whistled and howled, and so we decided that that wasn't going to work. So we turned around in a little bit and headed back to try our luck at fishing from shore. We found a fairly protected little cove, and we could cast a little spinner out there and drag it back, and the fish were hitting it.
There's your fish.
Hold him up and let's see him.
There's my fish.
With a little more luck like that, it looks like we won't have to have wieners for supper tonight. This small lake is quite high altitude. It's 8,440 feet above sea level, but it seems to be producing trout right on a regular basis, so we're going to get us enough fish to have us a fish feed for dinner tonight.
Lift him up. Yeah, nice one. There.
These are rainbow trout, and they'll be excellent eating coming out of this high altitude lake and only a few feet from the Green River and not very far from the Green River Lake in the Wind River Mountains. The Green River is pretty good fishing right now too, but I forgot my fly rod, and I like to fish with flies in the Green River, and so I won't be able to without a fly rod. But anyway, Marge likes to fish this way, so this is what we're going to do and catch us a nice mess of fish. In a short period of time, we have what we think are enough fish for dinner tonight, so we'll get in the pickup and head back to the cabin. We wander along the Green River for quite a ways, and I understand they're catching some very large browns in here with fly fishing, and they say it doesn't really matter what pattern of fly you use, that they're still biting. So next time I'll have to remember and bring my fly rod. It is like early spring at this altitude, so the grass is nice and green and the wildflowers are sticking their blossoms up skyward as we move down along the Green River that winds its way down from the mountains and ends up spilling into the Colorado River down in Utah. There are a few trees that line the banks of the Green River as we move down along the river out into the flatter areas. My uncles used to go up here and hack ties that they sold to the railroad, and then they'd leave the ties laid till high water, and they'd bring them over and float them down the Green River, and they called this the tie drive when they float them down the river to sell them to the railroad. There's even a very nice bridge crossing the river, and you can see where the old wooden one was and has rotted out and been replaced by this new modern bridge. They tell me they're catching really large brown trout in the Green River right now, so next time I'll have to remember my fly rod. Some places the Green River runs slow and deep, and other places it runs shallow and fast with some rapids and lots of rocks. There's always someone fishing near this bridge, and today is no exception. Well, we get back to the cabin, and it's my job to get the grass mowed around the cabin so it isn't a fire hazard up here at about 7,600 feet above sea level. And it's quite dry this year, so I need to mow the lawn. We have a few cactus in our front lawn which bloom real pretty in a short while. Marge and I really like our little log cabin, and we built it by ourselves and lifted all the logs by ourselves, and Marge did the peeling and I did the notching, and then the two of us would gang up to lift all these logs up by hand. And when we were getting to the point where Marge could no longer reach, a friend of ours showed up, which he's about 6'7", and he could just stand flat-footed and set those logs right up in the spot they needed. Anyway, it was a struggle building the cabin, but we finally got it done. And there's always some antelope out in the front yard. Usually there are a lot more than we see this year, but there's some, and the does seem to have real nice baby fawns. From our property, we can see 3 different mountain range. There's the Wind River, the Gros Ventre, and the Wyoming range, all within sight of the cabin. We usually see a little bit of wildlife around. Here's a little cottontail rabbit, that's a jackrabbit, and he's preening himself and getting himself looking all good and ready to hop off and do a little nibbling on some tender little weeds. It looks like we're going to have to put this cabin in charge of the antelope. This old doe's keeping the lawn nibbled down a little bit, and the jackrabbits, and we're going to have to head for home. The cabin does very well here since it's only like 15% moisture during the winter here, so nothing molds, and you go in there and things smell fresh and clean, just like someone's been there taking care of it. Although Marge didn't go to high school here, she still likes to look up on the hill and see if she can find the year she graduated painted up on the hill, and I think she found it. It was 1960. The cross was erected on Lizard Butte April 17th, 1938. It has been rebuilt a few times since then, but it was for the sunrise service, and about 1,000 people, probably mostly farmers from the Snake River Valley, were present for the sunrise services. After Lizard Butte, we cross the Snake River. The Snake River is what makes this country a very fertile valley, and then we only have a few miles to go till we're back in Oregon. Through the little town of Marsing, Idaho, and as we cross the bridge, Marsing will be here, and some of my family lived at Marsing, Idaho, someplace they farmed on the east side of the Snake River, down near where the Bruno sand dunes are, I think was where they settled and farmed for a few years. But then they moved back to Montana and various other places. Marsing looks like it's holding its own as far as the population situation. Just a small little farm town in the luscious Snake River Valley, and then on into Oregon desert, and we see the Steens Mountains ahead of us, so we're getting excited. We have a trailer house over near the Steens Mountains on our daughter's property, so we're going to go there and spend a couple nights and do a little fishing.